XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/XSWD.
This stream is powered by Wirecast, a powerful multi-input switching and graphics solution for live streaming in any situation.
The MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile all-round shotgun microphones on the market.
Okay, hello everyone and welcome to Pro AV Live. I'm joined by Alister Chapman. Hello Alister, how are you doing?
Hi everybody.
So, Sony have just had a press release about an hour ago now to sum up some of their new features for their FX9 and their Venice cameras and a few other little bits and bobs as well, some broadcast things which we'll run through briefly. But mainly this is about, we want to talk about the FX9, right Alister?
Yeah, that's, I think, the most area of most interest for most of the people that are probably watching right now.
Absolutely. The FX9 has been a hugely popular camera amongst our customers. And a large part of that is simply people that were already customers of Sony because of the FX7 and that popularity. But I think it has also caught more people's eyes because of its large format sense and stuff. I mean, how many conversations have you been having, Alistair, about the FX9? It's been massive, right?
Oh, it's been massive. It's been a big hit for Sony, I know, because it ticks a lot of the boxes about what people want. They want a large format camera. It's what everybody's talking about these days. They want some flexibility still to be able to shoot in 4K at Super 35 as well. Oversampling, great low noise performance, low light and everything else. It's a nice little camera. It's a very nice logical upgrade on the FS7. So it's been very popular, and it just looks nice as well. You know, it produces a really pretty picture.
Yeah, it's pretty much the best image for the price point that Sony have ever achieved, isn't it?
I think so. I think they've really, finally realized that this is, these cinema cameras is a different sector to broadcast. So, you have much more freedom to make it look the way you want it to look. It's not a standard vanilla Rec 709 camera. So they've put a lot of effort into making it look pretty out of the box, and I really think they got it right.
So this press announcement from Sony, am I right in thinking that this was the intended announcements for NAB?
I believe so. There may have been a few little things that haven't been announced or launched. I know things like firmware development and stuff like that are taking a lot longer because in Japan at the moment, as far as I'm aware, so I was speaking to one of the sort of people closely connected to the factory in Japan this morning, actually, and they're all working from home at the moment, or the majority of them are. So firmware development, all of those things is going much more slowly than it would do normally. They're still working, but they're not able to look into issues and things like that as closely because they just don't have the equipment at home to be able to do that. So I think there may be a few little things that perhaps they plan to do, but because of it's taking longer to develop stuff, they've had to postpone those at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I can see by reading the chat, you guys have been fantastic with the chat. You've been leaving comments from a long time ago before we went live on there. I know because of that quite a lot of you were hoping, I suppose is the right word, for new cameras at this NAB release. And it doesn't look like we've got any new actual cameras from Sony this year in this time slot of product announcements, I suppose.
Yeah, the rumor mills and the rumor sites have been going in overdrive, I think.
Absolutely,
and there isn't anything, and I wasn't expecting anything. It's not that something's been dropped that I was expecting. I wasn't actually expecting anything, but under NDA, I can't say anything. So
let's go over what we have got. So we've got a new firmware update for both the FX9 and the Venice. The FX9 is the one we'll probably spend the most time talking about today, but the Venice one is equally exciting. It's just that we've got a wider majority of people that would probably be interested in the FX9. But if you guys have any questions at all about any of the features that are in the new firmware updates or any FX9 features or Venice features, to be honest, just leave them in the chat. I can see all of your chats from all the different platforms that this is being streamed out to. So let me know and I'll pose those questions to Alister. But Alister, do you want to run us through some of the things that this new update has brought to the FX9?
Yeah, so I've got some notes here. Yeah, I can't remember everything. I wish I could. So we've got the one, I mean, we all knew it was coming anyway, was sort of confirmation of the 16-bit RAW output and the various frame rates and things that will work at. We knew that was coming anyway, but it's just now we know that it's 16-bit RAW up to 60 frames per second. and is it 60? What was the slide? Yeah, 60. I thought it was only going to be 30, but it looks like it's going to be up to 60 frames per second. But 16-bit RAW output from the camera. There's also RAW out.
60.
Yeah, up to 120
80.
frames per second in 2K.
I think it was
And 180. No, that's internal.
Oh, okay.
I've
just got Atomos'
no, you're right.
press release
You're right.
here.
It's 180. You're right. It's 180 frames per second in 2K out. The one thing that we were hoping for was the 4K 120, but that hasn't come. That is going to be coming somewhere down the road. We've got the 5K scan mode. Now, again, we knew this was coming, so it's just slightly over 5K. It's 5006 wide, I think, or something like that. And that's just over 5K wide scan mode. So that gives you the ability to shoot at, it's 83% of full frame. So it's not quite full frame, but it's more than Super 35, and that's going to be quite handy. And that goes up to 60 frames per second, whereas the existing full frame only goes up to 30. And we've also got the 4K DCI as well, which people were asking for, weren't sure whether it was coming, but now we do have 4K DCI as well. So that's really nice. So you have that 17:9 mode that certain Netflix productions have to have, and stuff that you might be doing for cinema projection or anything like that supports. So, we've got these extra recording modes. Other ones that, again, we kind of knew or at least suspected were coming is IAF.
Yes.
And IAF is really nice. So, yeah, that's an example of what you get. So instead of having the whole face with a box around with the AF as we currently get, you get boxes around eyes. And the camera will then focus on the eye. And I believe in the future, because this is just the first of many firmware updates that this camera will likely get, that we'll probably get animal eye as well, but that's probably something for the future. And this is a really nice thing, so you'll actually be able to focus on a person's eyes. So you do that sit-down interview, and it's not going to wander off and focus on the background or the tip of the person's nose or their ears. If you're shooting full frame, very large aperture, shallow depth of field, you want the eyes to be sharp. So this is a really nice thing there. Now, the other one that actually, it didn't take me by surprise entirely, but when I first heard the rumors and people started saying, oh, yeah, it's a touch screen on the camera, I wasn't convinced, because
I wasn't convinced either.
No, there were messages coming from Sony. So, Sony were trying to say, no. They didn't say, no, it isn't, but they would never confirm it. And obviously they wanted to keep it as a bit of a surprise. So now we know it is a touch screen, and you'll have touch to focus. And this is just great. And it's also, with some, not all, some of the menu things, so things like the status pages, you can swipe. So if you bring up the status pages for the camera, you can swipe across the screen to swipe between the status pages. So this is a really nice thing to have. It's going to make going through the menus quicker and easier. The focusing, touch to focus, pulling focus, things like that is going to be so much easier. It's going to be a lovely, lovely thing to have. So it's a really nice thing. User LUTs. So you'll be able to import and load 3D user LUTs into the camera just as you can with an FS7, F5, F55, etc. And again, we weren't sure whether that was going to come or not. I hoped it would. It would have been silly if it didn't come, if the FS7 and all the other cameras could do it and this one couldn't. So I suspected it would come, but now we know it's definite, and it will be in version 2. And then 6G SDI, hooray! So one of the limitations currently, if you want to get UHD or 4K out of the camera at 24, 25, or 30 frames per second, you have to use the HDMI. It is 10-bit 422, but above that, if you want to do 50 and 60p, you go to the 12G SDI currently and get 12G out. Well, now you'll be able to have 6G out as well. So the 24, 25, 30 frames per second can come out of the SDI to your external recorder as well.
Nice.
Now, talking of external recorders, of course, 16-bit RAW, we've also got today's Atomos announcement as well. And what Atomos are telling us, and I have a little bit of inside information here, is that 16-bit RAW will be able to go out from the FX9 and into a Shogun 7.
Which is huge, because up until this point, they'd said for quite a while that they were going to be supporting it, but they had up to this point said that it was going to be on their Neon lineup. Now,
that's right.
The Neon lineup looks amazing, absolutely amazing. They're big production monitors, they're very nice, but they're big production monitors, and they're not here yet still.
Yeah.
They're still
and
working.
Everyone had visions of running around a set with a 19-inch monitor bolted to the top of the camera somehow.
It doesn't work. It means that you can only ever use that raw output if you were feeding it into something like a video village. And if you were doing that, it would be a very nice setup. However, that's not the world that most of us live in.
Yeah. Now, when I heard that it was going to come out and they were going to be able to record it on the Shogun 7, my first thought, my initial reaction was, oh, how are they going to do that? Because that can only do 12-bit. And actually, that limitation still exists. But Atomos are being really clever, and I think this is actually a stroke of genius. So what they're going to do, I understand, my belief is that they're going to take the 16-bit out from the camera, so it'll come 16-bit linear out of the camera, and they're going to record it as 12-bit log. So your RAW recording will be 12-bit log RAW, which is actually a really good format. Okay, it's not quite as good as 16-bit. Perhaps we'd like 16-bit. But if it means you can do this on existing recorders, a lot of people have got the Shogun 7 already, and your file size isn't going to get any bigger, the data throughput won't get any bigger, your workflow, nothing changes, but you've now got 12-bit log RAW. I think that's really, really good. And there's nothing wrong with 12-bit log RAW. 12-bit log RAW contains 4 times the data of a 10-bit recording. And log RAW, I'd much rather have this than the 12-bit linear that the FS5 and FS7 has. This is a really worthwhile recording format.
Yeah.
And it's going to be superb to work with in post-production.
I think that difference is something that people may overlook quite easily at first, because you go, okay, 12-bit RAW is something we all know that the FS5 and the FX7 could do. And so now that we've got the FX9 saying 16-bit RAW, I think a lot of people have gone, oh, amazing, 16 bits. And then to hear this announcement, you go, oh, they're just dragging that back to 12-bit. That's a real shame. That's what we could do previously. But it is significantly different, and it is going to mean that the resulting images for people in most situations are probably going to turn out better, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's not put down the FS7, FS5, etc. That 12-bit linear that comes out of those cameras works really well.
Yeah, and it's very powerful for cameras of that price point to have that.
Yeah, but linear puts all the data in the highlights. And with 12-bit linear, it's actually technically impossible to do linear without throwing some data away. So the way it works with 12-bit linear, you tend to make some compromises in the shadow range to make it all work. Now, log, as we all know from our 10-bit log that we have in our cameras, the way that works is it records the highlights, each of your highlights, with the same amount of picture information. So it doesn't have to compromise the shadows, but to some degree it would be considered perhaps that the highlights are a little bit of a compromise, because in the real world, each time you go up a stop in brightness, the highlights get twice as big. But with log, we don't record twice as much, we record the same. And we get away with that with 10-bit and everything else because actually human vision is less acute in the highlights. We don't walk around staring at the sky or the sun because it hurts our eyes. So we tend to ignore highlights. So you get away with it.
It's also evolution, isn't it? We don't need to necessarily worry about the skies. We need to worry about the shadows and what's hiding in there. So, it's the way that our brains are wired.
Yeah, so it's the mid-range and the shadows that are really important. So we know that log works well already, and we know that log works well at 10-bit. Well, think about this now. That 12-bit is 4 times the data. and it's the same log recording. So a crude way of describing it is effectively this is 4 times better than what you've got currently with 12-bit log, with 10-bit log in the camera, recording 12-bit log outside of the camera. So actually, yeah, I'd love to have the 16-bit, but there's no way I want a 19-inch neon dragging around behind me on the set. So this gives us a really nice recording format that's manageable, that's not going to break the bank in terms of needing super fast media and things like that. I mean, if you look at Venice, which can do 16-bit linear on its XOCN format, the media is super expensive, the recorder is megabucks. So this actually, for the price point and everything else, is going to be really fabulous, and I'm really excited to get my hands on it when it becomes available.
It's a much more practical option for the majority of users, but it also is really interesting that they have kept that 16-bit to go to the neon, because for some productions, the ones where it actually makes sense to trail around a big 19, 24, even 50-inch production monitor around, then that means that they can unlock even more potential from the same camera that you and me are using to just run around with a little recorder on the top, which is very powerful.
Exactly, isn't it? I mean that's the thing. If you're only outputting 12-bit linear, you can never make it into 16-bit. And actually, there's no point in converting 12-bit linear to log because it wouldn't be any better. So by having a 16-bit linear output on the camera, which effectively is giving you a raw pipe to what the sensor outputs, you can then record it however you want. So you could take it and you can record it as ProRes RAW in 12-bit log, or you could convert it to really good 10-bit log ProRes. And this will be better if you do that. If you take that 16-bit data out, it's really like having the sensor directly connected to the recorder. Nothing is thrown away. And then you convert it to 10-bit ProRes log if that's what you want to record. That is going to be superb quality ProRes log. So, that 16-bit raw output is really important, and it doesn't get any better than that. It's as good as anybody comes out of any camera. Whereas if it was a 12-bit output, you can't make it magically into 16-bit. But if we start at 16, we can then choose how we want to record it.
Absolutely.
So it's a big deal.
So let's cover quite quickly some of the other interesting tidbits from Sony's releases, and then we'll go back and talk about some of the first features that we mentioned in a bit more detail, shall we?
Yeah, so the reason I included these monitors actually is because one of the other things I hadn't got around to mentioning on the FX9 is it will also have HDR built in. So my understanding is, so currently in the camera we have custom mode and Cine EI. So I think what we're now going to get is actually 3 distinct modes in the camera. You'll have a standard mode, which will be for your standard dynamic range shooting, which is where the S-Cinetone and all of that will be. Then there will be an HDR mode for shooting in HDR, which will have hybrid log gamma and possibly some other color spaces and things. I'm not entirely sure yet, but certainly will have at least hybrid log gamma in there. And then there will be the Cine EI mode for shooting log as well. So I believe we're now going to have 3 modes in the camera. And one of those will be with HLG, hybrid log gamma. So you'll be able to get an HDR output from the camera directly over the HDMI or SDI, or record as HLG inside the camera. Now, HLG has a degree of backwards compatibility with Rec 709. So in terms of contrast and stuff like that, if you play back HLG on a regular SDR TV, it doesn't look incorrect. It's not optimum, but it certainly doesn't look bad. It doesn't look terrible. But if you have an HDR TV, of course, you can view it in HDR. And I'm quite convinced that, very, very soon now we'll start seeing HLG broadcasting on terrestrial television and things like that, so that people with HDR TVs can get a better picture. Now, these monitors, the thing about these is that these are HDR monitors, and they're far more affordable than anything HDR-wise that Sony's done to date. I mean, they're actually really really very competitively priced, which is perhaps a little unusual for Sony with their monitors. I mean, Sony makes some great monitors, but they're generally at the higher end in terms of price and cost. So, we have a 24-inch, the X2400, and 18-inch, the X1800. And of the two, actually, I really like the X1800. because it's small enough to take on a lot of shoots, to have on your camera cart or just sitting on a table in the corner. It's transportable. It's not a huge device. And 18 inches is a nice size on set. It's not too small. It's not too big. So it's a monitor I'm really excited about and really looking forward to playing with once they actually become available. I'm not sure of the pricing. I think it's about $5,000 if I remember right, something like that.
I need to check on pricing, so I probably shouldn't talk about pricing.
Yeah, no, not a good idea to talk on pricing. Yeah. but when I did see the pricing, I was quite surprised because I've been looking at my monitor options for HDR, and they're certainly at a similar price to the middle to lower end of the HDR range. So definitely worth looking at if you're thinking about HDR monitoring.
It's great to see from a brand like Sony.
Yes.
The other thing that you included in here, which looked rather interesting, was some of their volumetric bits and bobs.
This just caught my eye. I mean, we've seen this technology emerging over the years. There's been all sorts of things, taking the output from multiple cameras and combining them. And of course, if we go back to the Matrix, the first Matrix film, there was bullet time, where you had a circle of cameras in a complex frame, and you could fly around the actors and do all sorts of amazing things. I wouldn't say it's commonplace now, but we've all seen it. But this needs far fewer cameras, and it doesn't need a complex rig. So it takes the output from multiple cameras, and that goes into a computer, and almost instantly can recreate any camera angle. So the idea behind this is mainly for sports, is you have your cameras arranged around the pitch or the playing field. And whether it's Wimbledon with Hawkeye, which is a Sony technology, is that they'll be able to replay the shot or replay the action practically instantly from any camera angle you want.
Yeah, a camera that doesn't exist.
Cameras that so if you're trying to look at that hand, did he touch the ball? You'll be able to look from the most appropriate camera angle to see whether it happened or not.
So let's just explain what we're looking at here. We've got a bunch of shots there on the left. Those are all real camera feeds coming from an actual physical camera. What we're seeing there on the right, that volumetric mode, is the computer interface, if you like, of what it's showing in terms of a 3D model that it's using those shots to create. And then the final result is this image, which is a real-time live camera from a camera that didn't exist.
So this shot looks like the camera's actually almost on the court.
Yes.
Whereas the actual cameras are quite some way back from the court.
Absolutely.
And what if you watch the video, they actually do the whole bullet time thing and fly around the players, and they can generate this in real time. So you haven't got to wait days or weeks or hours even to process this. So this will be in the back of the OB truck, and instead of just a slow motion replay, you'll be able to slow motion replay from any camera angle that you want.
For sports,
and it's just a fascinating
this is
technology.
Going to be huge, isn't it? I mean, football matches, tennis matches, American football, baseball, all of that sort of stuff. I can see this being used in every single one of them all the time.
So I think it's mainly going to be sort of stadium or venue events where you can set up the cameras beforehand. But I think it's just going to be fascinating to be able to see those replays, watching Wimbledon, and you've got that, Hawkeye, you wait and you see the yellow line that shows that the ball went over and all of that as a computer graphic. But this now you'll be able to see from whatever angle you want, whether the ball went over the line, and it's a video clip, so it plays. So you can see all of this in motion, which is just really quite scary, because once the quality gets good enough, and we're thinking about lockdown now, is you could cover a football match with all these locked off cameras around the stadium. You don't need any camera operators, and there's one guy in an OB truck creating all the different camera views, which is a bit worrying for us camera operators, because eventually that's where it's going to go.
There is that. Okay, so let's go back and let's talk about the FX9. So we briefly mentioned at the start the addition of this 5K mode to get some of these functions, but let's talk in a little bit more detail in terms of what you can currently do now on the camera and what you are going to be able to do once this version 2 hit. Do we know when this version 2 is hitting, by the way? I'm not sure I've actually seen that. When is the... is this
I
now?
think it's... No. And
Right.
that's the big thing, isn't it? Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait a bit. I think the original target was June, but I think it's going to be August now.
Gotcha.
COVID-19 is not helping the firmware engineers. And it's not so much a thing about writing the firmware, it's more about testing.
Yeah.
So Sony are very, very careful to put their firmware through all kinds of tests. They test every possible combination of features, functions, and button presses in as wide a range of lighting conditions and everything else as they can. Every now and again, stuff gets through, but there's weeks of testing before they will release this.
Kagato is saying it's going to be released in October. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah.
That seems very late. I knew it was at least August now, but okay.
I don't think I saw in their official things an official date. So
yes.
We might.
Yeah, that's a shame if it's that far down the road, because we all want it now, of course. So one of the one of the big limitations right now for a lot of people is they want to shoot full frame and they want to shoot in interlaced.
Yep.
And to shoot 50i or 60i, the sensor has to run at 50 or 60 hertz. So that means you can't use full frame currently because the camera can't run at 50 or 60 hertz in full frame. Yep. So you have to use Super 35. Now, so we have this new scan mode, this 5K scan mode that sits between Super 35 and full frame. Sony are calling it full frame 5K. I think that's stretching things a little bit.
How much of a crop do we reckon it's going to be?
So in terms of a crop, it's 1.25, I think. So, it's a bit of a crop. I mean, if you think about it, 4K is the Super 35, 6K is full frame. It's halfway between. The nice things about it is, so it isn't, you're going to want to use full frame lenses with it. Your shots won't be quite as wide as they would be in true full frame. What's going to be interesting with this is to see which perhaps Super 35 lenses you can actually use in this mode. Possibly things like the Fujinon MKs. Yes. I possibly think you'll get away with them. And it's still oversampled as well. So you still have that noise reduction benefit. You still have that increase in resolution in the 4K recordings and everything else that comes from oversampling.
I think they might well cover it. We'll have to do more extensive testing, of course. But I think, off the top of my head, the MKs do have a larger image circle than they need for normal Super 35.
Yeah, and again, I've played around with this, looking at the image circle in full frame and how big it is, and I think it will cover. Yeah. So that's really nice. And
that would be a brilliant pairing. I could see people buying this with the MK lenses and then just never going into the full frame mode of the FX9, just living in this 5K mode, because then they get full 4K in that format of the sensor, so nearly full frame, up to 4K 50 frames a second, and being very happy with those very nice MK lenses.
Yeah, so don't buy your MKs yet. We haven't, as we keep saying, we haven't tested this. We are speculating on this. This is pure speculation, but I think it will cover. And I mean, I use the MKs on my FX9 in the Super 35 mode, and it looks gorgeous with those lenses on there. So
that's worth pointing out as well. They are already quite a nice pairing with the camera, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. So this is just a little enhancement if it works, which would be very nice to have. But there'll be other lenses as well, not just the MKs that have a large image circle. You might have a touch of vignetting around the edge, but actually sometimes that can be quite a nice look to have that little shading and softness around the edge. It sort of can make things look quite nice sometimes. So it will depend on the lenses.
Yep.
So that's a really important thing, is that 5K mode. DCI, I think for some people, is going to be a big deal as well. So you'll be able to shoot in full frame with a DCI output. So that's going to be nice if you are doing anything for Netflix, or if you want to produce something that just has that slightly wider aspect ratio, the little black bar top and bottom when you show it on a regular UHD TV. Just gives you that more film-like look, if that's what you want. So that was something people were asking for. and you can't do it now. In terms of high speed, well, we're going up to 180 frames per second. So
this
a
is
little
very
bit better.
welcome, because this
so
brings it to the same sort of slow motion levels as we're used to from the FS7.
Yes. Yeah, so you're limited to 120 right now. So going up to 180 is definitely nicer. You are still limited to having to use the 2K scan mode, so full frame 2K and full 2K Super 35 scan modes. So you'll never get the same image quality that you get in the full scan modes. I think it is worth just sort of accepting that the high speed on this camera in 2K is a sort of a bonus feature, really. But if you expose nice and brightly, for most things, it looks really good, but you will from time to time get things that will trip up the sensor when you do that. The FS7 was the same. I mean, FS7 shooting 2K in the full sensor size was never fantastic.
Yeah, sure.
It was, it did the job. And if you do get a problem with that, with jaggies and aliasing when you're doing that, just tiny bit of defocusing gets rid of it.
Okay.
It's just that mismatch that you have with the optical filter. It's a 6K camera, a 6K sensor with a 6K optical filter. So if you scan the whole sensor at 2K, there's a mismatch now. You've got a 6K optical filter and a 2K scan. So you'll get some artifacting that will get past. You can either use some diffusion. You need to go to at least a quarter or even a half pro mist or something like that. That will typically reduce it. Or if you're shooting and you can see it, just fractional defocusing of the shot will very often eliminate it. It's never going to go away completely because you really want to change the filtering behind the lens. But it's just one of those things. You can't have both. You can't have a 6K resolution image and a 2K scan from the same size of sensor. So,
well, without having a few drawbacks. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in a bit more detail, and then leave your comments, everyone, by the way, in that chat. So that if you've asked a question in that chat, there's been lots of talk going on, so I'm going to really struggle to try and fish back through it to get everyone's questions. So if you really want your question answered, please leave it again now, and then I can find them a lot easier and actually get a chance to answer them before we finish for today. But while people are doing that, the thing I wanted us to talk through, Alister, if that's all right, in more detail, is the 3D user lookup tables. Because I know there was a lot of people that were not... When in the current state of the FX9 firmware, they weren't working perhaps the way that people were expecting them to. What's changed here?
Right. So in terms of when you'll be able to apply lookup tables and things like that, I don't believe anything's changed there. So lookup tables still have some limitations in that basically if you want to have a lookup table on the viewfinder or on the SDI outputs while you're shooting and recording S-Log, then you need to be shooting UHD, or it will be DCI as well. So it'd be DCI or UHD. And then you can have an HD output on the SDIs and in the viewfinder, and then you can apply a LUT to that. The difference now, at the moment, you only have S709 and 709-800, and I think S-Log 3 as well as LUTs. You'll be able to now import your own lookup tables into the camera and apply those instead 3D user lookup tables. So that means you can shoot some test shots, grade them, come up with the look that you want for your project. From that, make a LUT, load it into the camera, and then apply that LUT to the output. The other thing you can do with it as well, though, is to bake the LUT in deliberately. So whether you're shooting in HD or in UHD, you can apply the LUT to the recording. So you might want to apply a very stylized look to your production in camera. Obviously, once you've applied the LUT, it's very difficult to then to do any further grading later on. But it means that very quickly you can create a whole range of different styles and looks in the camera. So if you're doing something in a very quick turnaround, doing something live perhaps, where you need that look immediately out of the camera, you'll be able to do that via a user 3D LUT. Just apply the LUT and apply it to the recording, and then everything has the LUT applied to it. And it's a very powerful tool. It really is. So it didn't make sense that the FX9 didn't have it because the FS7 did. But when the FS7 came out, it wasn't there in the first firmware release. We had to wait a little bit down the road for it. So, we have to be a little bit patient, and these things will come. And I don't know. I haven't seen a comprehensive list yet of everything that's in this firmware update.
Yeah.
I think it's quite possible that what we're seeing is just the key highlights, and there may be a few other little things as well that may be in there or may not be. I don't know. I'm hoping that there might be a couple of other things that aren't mentioned that perhaps Sony think are too insignificant to tell us about.
Yeah. Or they just want to release a little bit more quietly than
and there will be other firmware updates down the road. So I think this is just the beginning.
So let's get to some questions. So Pete Wages is saying, will the FX9 still record the internal 4K XAVCI in S-Log 3 while outputting RAW? Or does RAW shut off the internal recording? Do we know this yet?
I don't have any documentation that confirms or denies this. My bet would be yes, you'll be able to record 4K DCI internally and output RAW at the same time. If I remember right, the FS7 can.
Yeah, I think it's one of the benefits of using the extension back is that the extension back can handle the RAW bit while the internal cameras can handle the recording. Yeah,
exactly. So the XDCA FX9 takes the connector that's on the top back of the camera is a bit like the PCI bus in your computer. So that connector has access to all the data that's flowing through the camera, so the sensor data and everything else. And then the XDCA takes that data and processes it. So all you have to do from the camera's point of view is set it up in the correct way so that the data is then present, and then the XDCA does the hard work. So that means that the camera is still free to have all the other recording modes and everything else that it has normally. So I wouldn't be surprised if you can shoot the 4K UHD or DCI in the camera, including a proxy or a sub-recording if that's what you want, and get the RAW output at the same time. Yeah. Again, I haven't seen this confirmed anywhere, but I believe that's what will be possible.
Yep. And would be very, very welcome. I think it would be a bit of a problem if it didn't do that, because then you're relying on separate things to be, if something happens to your Atomos, if something happens to your cable, there's not anywhere near as much built-in redundancy.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of questions about when can we expect an A7S Mark III, and we don't know, guys. I haven't got a clue.
I have no idea.
I wanted one 6 months ago. I'm in the same boat as all of you. I don't know. Okay, Will Knight says, any inside knowledge about assignable buttons to switch between full frame and Super 35? No, we haven't seen that in this announcement.
Yeah, one word, no. No inside knowledge. I think this is very important, guys, to understand is I've got to be careful what I say. I'm a Sony ambassador, and I have a lot of privileges working for Sony. So I get to deal face to face with a lot of people, and we have a lot of discussions in restaurants and bars over, perhaps a bit too much alcohol has flowed, and things get discussed that perhaps they shouldn't always be discussed. But something that I've known, and I keep saying this, is that the guys at Sony, the engineers right the way through Sony, especially the engineers, they are truly passionate about the products that they make. I'm not just saying this because I'm a Sony voice, Sony mouthpiece. I've seen the guys really distressed when somebody's found a problem in a camera firmware or something like that, because they put their lives into these cameras. And when somebody posts a video clip online and it looks great and it looks amazing, the factory in Japan, they all share it and they're like, oh wow, look how brilliant this, look what the camera's doing. And then when somebody posts something and there's got a problem in the shot, the opposite's happening. They share that and they're like, oh my goodness, that's horrible. What can we do about this? Yeah. So they do listen to us all of the time, but they're not allowed to say anything. And I think the reasoning behind that, reading between the lines, is what they don't want is somebody to say something that is then taken as gospel. And I have to be careful about this as well. If I said something, Sony have said you will get this and it's wrong, then everybody looks bad. There's a lot of backpedaling that has to be done. You have to explain why it was wrong and blah, blah, blah. And the whole thing becomes a nightmare. So their general policy is to not allow people to post stuff in social media in case somebody posts something that is incorrect or Sony can't then meet that expectation. So they don't respond. They're not there. You think they're not on Facebook, but they are. And they're following the threads. They are listening to what we say all of the time. And they have guys that go to all of the trade shows and they stand there behind you with everyone with notepads frantically listening in on discussions. Perhaps they shouldn't be, but to see what people are talking about these cameras. And they know we want this. And if it can be done, I'm quite sure it will be done. But it's a big question as to whether. It seems like something that should be something easy to do. And I don't understand why it isn't there. Yeah. But they knew that we wanted it on the FS7 and we never got it. So I think there is something underneath that makes it difficult for them to do it.
Yeah, maybe. Well, let's keep shouting, hey?
Yes.
So, talking of little issues which the engineers spot up, Mike Abler has left several messages about... he calls it a green fringing problem in full frame 6K. Now, this is something I don't know anything about, but apparently you do know a bit about it, Alister. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so what this is some people in certain shots. Now, it's generally when you're shooting into a very, very bright background where the pixels are either overloaded or very close to being what you call saturated on the sensor, and then you have something high contrast in the foreground, is that some people are seeing a green or perhaps a red edge. Now, it's very difficult without being able to see what's actually coming off the sensor itself to understand exactly what might be causing this.
So now just a little bit of information, Mike Abler, I've just scrolled back to find his previous comments, and he does say those blinds behind you would have likely been green fringing around them using the FX9, Carl, and that's exactly the issue. It's such a common lighting situation which we need to now avoid using the FX9 in fear of the dreaded green lines everywhere. I know some have not seen this problem, but many have, and it's a real deal breaker. I am using the FX9 now for a start, just to clear that up. The camera that is on me right now is the FX9, but because it's taking a 1080p output into a stream. So so I don't want to be shot down here. I've seen what some people have been posting, and I agree it looks horrid. I'm not going to say otherwise because that would be a lie. It's what I'm seeing some people posting doesn't look nice, and it shouldn't be that way. Having said that, I've spent hours trying to get anywhere close to as bad as some other people are seeing because I am working with Sony to try and provide them with examples of this so that they can evaluate it, and I can't make my camera do it to the degree that other people are seeing it. And I've shot hours and hours of material of my footage, and I've not seen one instance of this in any of my own footage. And I've shot sunrises, sunsets, shooting through trees at the sun, all sorts of things. So it is quite a specific, narrow range of times when it occurs. It's definitely related to lens and focal length, because in the testing that I've done, I found that with a lens, you might see a bit of an edge, nothing like what some people are seeing at one focal length, but only at that one focal length and not at any other. One of the things to understand is the way a Bayer sensor works is incredibly complex, and the way that image is created from the Bayer sensor, there's an awful lot of, I don't want to use the words tricks because it sounds like it's a con, but one of the processes that happens when you de-Bayer a sensor is you look for edges, because one of the things we have to understand is that we don't have full color resolution. There's a quarter of the red compared to green pixels and a quarter blue compared to green. So there's a lot less red and blue information. So you have to fill in a lot of gaps. And where you have an edge, you want that edge to be sharp. You don't want the color to not be along that edge with a black and white
monochrome edge. So you have to fill in the gaps with information that isn't there, because one side of the edge will be one color, the other side of the edge will be another. But because of the way the pixels are laid out, you won't have the actual color information that's on that edge necessarily. So you have to make a guess. So that when you do this demosaic process, the process looks for edges, and then, much like a Disney cartoon where they draw the black line and fill in the colors, the camera's having to do that. Now, if you've got a lens that's producing a lot of chromatic aberration along an edge, the pixels close to that edge are going to possibly be green or purple or red, and then the camera's going to fill in the gaps with what it knows to be there. So if it's seeing chromatic aberration and it's seeing that purple hue, and it fills in that edge with that, it will make that look nastier than perhaps it should. Now, there's stuff that Sony can perhaps do, looking at how those processes are working, how the algorithms that convert what comes off the sensor into a color picture work, to perhaps minimize this. I've seen similar issues with other cameras as well. It's not something that I think is unique to the FX9. Why don't we see it on same lens on an alpha? Well, it's a different sensor, different processing. For video, the way you sharpen the image and things like that is often different. So there's lots of differences between these cameras that can mean that one will produce it and one won't. But just to be very clear, Sony are aware of this. And again, I don't want to break the trust that Sony have with me to be able to talk about stuff like this when they can't. So I don't want to talk about it too much. But other than to say they know about it, they are concerned. They will look into it. It's going to take a while because, as I said earlier, the engineers and people like that, because of COVID, are having to work from home like a lot of us are. So things are taking longer than normal. But we're not being ignored. And if they can do something about it, they will. They're not going to ignore us. Is it an enormous deal, though? I feel for the people that are seeing this, because obviously we don't want it.
He does say he's seeing it quite a lot. It might be worth, Mike, to get in touch directly with Sony yourself, because they need information to be able to fix things like this. And if you can provide them information that other people maybe can't because of that, sure, it doesn't necessarily help you right now, but it might help them create a fix sooner for it.
Yeah, so I don't want to flood my direct message inbox on Facebook. So anybody that is on the FX9, any of the FX9 user groups on Facebook, what might be useful is, so direct message me. And what is helpful for the engineering team is to have the original material. Yep. Not something that you've converted to an H.264 or something. They need the XAVCI files.
Yep. And
all they want is a couple of frames. They don't need the entire clip. So what you can do is, if you take some footage that's got this issue, go into Catalyst Browse and just extract 3 or 4 frames as a clip. So you can go into Catalyst Browse, bring the clip into Catalyst Browse, mark an in point, and then a couple of frames later, 3 or 4 frames, mark an out point, and then export that as a new XAVC file. So it's the one that looks like 2 little boxes in the top corner. And that will create a new MXF file, doesn't render anything, doesn't change anything. It literally just takes the frames and exports them. And if you can put it in a WeTransfer, upload it to WeTransfer or something like that, and direct message me on Facebook, I can then download that and we can get those files to Sony for them to have a look at. But I think you do have to remember there are thousands and thousands, I can't remember the numbers, but there's several thousand FX9s out there being used. And while, yes, there are a number of people that are posting and reporting this, it's not in the thousands. No. And there are people using these cameras day in and day out that are not seeing this. So whether it's isolated to some specific cameras, I don't know. We don't know enough about this at the moment to fully understand it. But I don't think it is something that everybody is seeing all of the time. It really isn't. There's some videos just come back from Antarctica that were shot on the FX9 that look amazing. There's lots and lots of
bright light there.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of material out there online shot on FX9s, and the only samples I've seen are from a handful of people that are posting it on Facebook currently.
Cool. So Mike is saying, thank you, Alister, and he's saying he's very glad the engineers are working on it. That's reassuring, which is brilliant.
I can't promise that anything will change. Let's be very clear about this.
Sure.
Is that I can't promise that anything will change. All I can say is that they are aware of it and they will look at it. It will be a little while before we hear anything or see anything because they're working from home at the moment. They don't have the engineering resources at home to be able to delve into what comes off that sensor to see what's going on. Those of you that are seeing it, I've yet to see anybody with two cameras with it because I'd love to see if they're getting the same result with two different cameras.
That would be very
to isolate it as to whether it's something unique to their particular camera.
Also,
because
maybe Mike can team up with somebody else who has the camera or take it to somewhere like a dealer like us if he's in the UK. Once this is all over, this is the thing. The current situation right now makes this all so much harder.
Try as I might, I cannot make my camera get to the point where it's like, whoa, there's a problem.
Sure.
I get what looks like a very slight bad chromatic aberration, but it's certainly, unless you pixel peep, unless you really zoom right into the shot, you wouldn't even notice it. You really wouldn't.
Okay, so the last question that I want to talk about before we wrap up is from Pete Wages, who says, does he know if they'll open up the grayed out options in the monitoring LUT menu while in UHD anytime soon so that we can send lookup tables to one monitor and log to another? I
don't think that's going to change.
Do you not think?
He's asking to have a LUT on one output, but not the other, I believe.
Yep.
I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, I think it's to do with monitoring boards. But it can do it in 1080p. Is that right?
Yeah. No. So all the LUT output options are generally either on for everything except the recording or off for everything except the recording. You can't divide it all up at the moment. Maybe that will come down the line. At the moment, I think that's still
it might be a hardware limitation with monitoring boards. It might be a software limitation.
That is one of the nice things that having the raw output will give you, of course, is you can output your raw output to your Atomos recorder, and you could have a LUT on there, and then you have a clean output on the other outputs. But that does, that means having the XDCA FX9 on the back. I don't know whether that will change or not down the road. I honestly don't.
Okay, cool. So the last thing I wanted to ask personally is, I mean, obviously this firmware isn't here yet, but you are using the FX9 a huge amount right now, and I'm sure you will continue to use that for the next year or so. Once this drops, how do you think this firmware announcement and the features that they've implemented is going to change how you use the camera personally?
Oh, I'm going to be using that raw output as much as I can.
Okay.
I love working with raw in post-production. The flexibility that it gives you in post is just amazing. I've already got a Shogun 7. It's on the back of my camera here right now. So I'll just have to get the XDCA FX9 and use that. That flexibility that you get in post to pull and push the material is just really, really amazing. And I think what's really nice is I'll be able to record in the camera as well as RAW at the same time. Yep. So I can pick and choose in post which files I want to work with. If I'm in a hurry, I could, and this is the thing, is in the camera, you should be able to, you'll be able to bake a LUT in. Yep. So you'll be able to have, even if it's just the S709 LUT, an in-camera recording ready to go for a direct-to-air live or direct, quick edit for a corporate videos, whatever you're doing, but then your external raw recording you'll be able to use for your high quality stuff later on, and with all the grading and everything else. So it gives it more flexibility. the 5K mode. I'm really interested to see if I can use my MKs in 5K.
Yeah, I was going to say the 5K is on one of my lists as well, because I do think if it comes out at about a 1.2, 1.25, that sort of level crop, we haven't seen that many cameras with that amount of crop. I mean, I suppose the closest thing that springs to mind for me is the 1DC, which had or the 1DX Mark II from Canon, which had a 1.3 times crop. And I actually found that a really nice crop factor, having a middle ground between the advantages of full frame and Super 35. I found it a really nice field of view personally.
And yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. And hey, let's not forget touch to focus.
Well, yeah.
I mean, just being able to just, so at the moment, if you've got multiple faces and you're using the face recognition and you want to pick a specific face, it's a bit clumsy. You've got to use the thumbstick to choose the face that you want. To be able to just touch on a face,
absolutely,
and the camera is just going to pull focus onto that face is going to be amazing. I'm now using autofocus 95% of the time when I'm using my FX9.
I mean, it's a great system. Why wouldn't you?
And it works, but there's every now and again it's like, I want to change the focus, and it's it's clumsier than it needs to be.
Sure.
Just being able to touch the LCD and go, right, focus there, please.
Yep.
Somebody that does weddings and things like that, it's such a useful thing. This is going to be.
Yeah.
I think it's an incredibly powerful thing to have. And of course, IAF, when you're doing interviews or anything like that, just so you know it's the eyes that are in crystal clear, sharp focus. Yeah, it's going to make it so much easier.
Because I've done quite a lot of autofocus testing with both the FX9 now and the Canon cameras, which have had it for quite a bit longer. The biggest thing that I kept coming back to when comparing the two cameras was that the Canons were just simply easier to control because of that touchscreen. And it was really just bits about how the UI is laid out, but mainly it is just that touchscreen. Being able to do that for anything that isn't tracking a face in an interview just makes it so much easier and more intuitive to do. So I had all of my fingers crossed that the rumors were true, that it was actually a touchscreen built into the FX9. And we now have confirmation.
In the menus as well. Just being able to go into a menu and select the item that you want straight away instead of having to scroll. It's going to speed up using the camera so much. I mean, it's a pretty quick camera to use already. I think that the improvements that they made to the menu layout and buttons and everything else have made it a very fast camera to use, which is why I like shooting with it.
Sure.
Now it's just going to be even better. Yeah. Direct menu. So on what this should mean now is that all those little icons that come up on your LCD for your shutter speed and turning the steady shot on and off and everything else, you just be able to tap on them to change all those settings that are on the LCD now. So you won't have to go into the menus most of the time. You'll just be able to, you want to change to the ECS shutter, just tap on the shutter settings and away you go.
Do we know that that's how it's going to work with the menu things?
I believe so.
Okay, because that is going to be very cool.
I see no reason why not. I mean, they're there now anyway with direct menu. You just have to select it with the thumbstick.
Yeah.
So it would be ridiculous if it didn't work.
Yeah.
So you just be able to touch all the direct menu items. So turning steady shot on and off currently either has to be on an assignable button or you have to go into a menu if your lens doesn't have a switch. But being able to just touch on the screen to turn that on and off, put in an exposure offset really quickly just by touching the AFE shift icon, all that stuff's going to be so much faster.
Absolutely. So I think that is enough on these new firmware updates for now. I think they certainly turn the FX9 into a much more full-rounded camera once these are going to come out. I think it is the most popular camera right now that we're selling, and I think for good reason. The FX9 is fairly undeniable, really. This is going to be a professional workhorse for many, 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 many people.
Yeah, and of course this is just the beginning on that firmware.
Yeah.
It would be lovely. So if Sony are watching this, because I have to plug at Sony as well, the same as everybody else. I don't work for Sony. I'm not a Sony employee. Is let's have a proper roadmap. Let's have some insight into what might be coming further down the road. So we've got version 2. We know what's in 2. Let's
know what's in 3.
Let us know, even if it's not a definitive list. Even if it's this is what we're hoping to have. It would be really nice to know.
Absolutely. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all for your questions. We are live still next week. We've got 2 streams lined up currently for next week. We've got Ollie Kensington on the Tuesday at 2 p.m. talking about a project breakdown of his piece of work that he did for a university called the UWE Mental Health course. That's a really interesting chance to see behind the scenes on somebody else's corporate work and think about your own work by doing that. I really like these project breakdowns. And then on Wednesday, we're back with Alister. We're talking about the Northern Lights. Do you want to say anything really quickly about that, Alister, before you go?
Well, we're going to look at sort of break down one of my Northern Lights trips and what I have to take, the equipment that I take. So we'll be talking about working a little bit in cold, harsh environments, and then a lot on time lapse and exposure and shooting different techniques that you can use for shooting time lapse, because it's not just the Northern Lights, it's all those sunrises, sunsets, and we can look at when's a good time to use auto exposure, when not. All of those things. So it's sort of a bit of a breakdown of that whole one of those trips and all the different techniques and methods that I might use and employ, and looking at alternative techniques for time lapse and shooting in low light and at night and lenses, all sorts of stuff.
For anyone who missed it, we did a similar stream to that one that we're going to do on Northern Lights and your work in Norway. Next week, we did one a couple of weeks ago on Alister's work with storms, and particularly just a bit more general in terms of adventure filmmaking. So that one, all of these streams are available to watch after the fact live on YouTube or on our website. So just head over to prov.co.uk and you can find Alister's stream on adventure filmmaking. It's well worth a watch in advance of our one next Wednesday. Okay, so thank you all so much for watching and leaving comments. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Alister, for teaching us all about the new features of the FX9, and I will see you next week.
Yeah, goodbye all.
The MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile all-round shotgun microphones on the market. XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
This stream is powered by Wirecast, a powerful multi-input switching and graphics solution for live streaming in any situation.
the MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile, all-round shotgun microphones on the market.